A lot of people feel like they need to have all these out of the world experiences like climbing Mount Everest or finding the cure to a rare disease to be able to write an incredible personal statement. Well, that's not true. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to write an incredible personal statement, even if you feel like you haven't necessarily done anything extraordinary. And to prove it, I will be reading from my own personal statements that got me into Oxford and LSE. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Precious, I'm a PhD student, and in 2023, I wrote the personal statements that got me into Oxford and LSE. But let me tell you, when I started writing my personal statement, I remember feeling just very intimidated. I spent a lot of time online, reading sample personal statements, and I remember feeling like, wow, I really have nothing to talk about. I felt like I stood no chance. And so if you're feeling that way right now, or if you've ever felt that way, you're not alone. I'm going to need you to put those thoughts aside, those feelings, those emotions aside. They're completely irrational. Let's write an amazing personal statement. So the first thing you want to keep in mind when writing your personal statement is that a personal statement is just that. It is personal. It is not a reiteration of your grades or your experiences, right? These things are for your CV and your transcripts. The goal of the personal statement is to allow the reader get to know you on a deeper, more personal level. And this is also why, it is not so important that you've done anything out of this world or incredible, because it is a personal statement. It is about your own personal experiences. But there's a balance there, right? We don't want to start rambling off about random things like, oh, I love Minecraft, or yeah, I like spaghetti and meatballs for dinner. There's a balance there. You need to find that balance. The second thing is to investigate. I'm going to need you to put on your Sherlock Holmes hat and start digging for information. The first thing you want to do is find out what the specific requirements are for the personal statement you're writing. So you want to understand things like the word count, and you need to adhere very strictly to that word count. You don't want to write more than you're allowed to, right? And then you also need to understand if there are any requirements that you need to address in your personal statement, any prompts, that you need to address in your personal statement, right? Those things are super important. You need to know them inside out, and you need to know them really well before you even start thinking of writing, right? The next thing is to dive into the degree website. We're going to call this list one. This is the first list we're going to make. And what we need to do here is we need to first look at the courses on the list. So the courses that are part of that degree that you're applying to. And you need to make a list of all the modules, anything interesting that catches your eye. And I think that this should come very naturally to you. Because if you're applying to this degree, then I expect that you're excited about something. If you're not, then maybe this is the time to consider, I guess. And so what we're going to do is make a list, just a very simple list of everything you think is interesting, everything you feel like you're going to be very passionate about learning, about studying. And this is really useful to be able to connect our personal experiences later on too. The next step is to brainstorm. And now we're going to call this list 2, right? And what we're going to do here is to make a list of everything remotely interesting that we've done, right? So the time that we volunteered at the Christmas kitchen for the homeless, the time that you helped that old lady carry her groceries up the stairs because she has a bad back, the time that you played football for your village team and won the regional championships. The point is, you want to get everything on paper, no matter how mundane or silly it sounds. And the reason for this is it is a personal statement, right? And so not everyone has the luxury of spending summers in Tanzania rescuing baby goats, or interning at a very fancy law firm. Some of us have had to work in the summers to pay for our own education. And trust me, the universities, they know and they understand that, right? They're not looking for privilege, they're looking for potential. The point is, it is not about how flashy your experiences are, right? It is about how you reflect those experiences. That's what is important. The next thing we want to do is to make connections. We're going to make connections between what we've previously studied and the degree we're applying to, and between our personal experiences and the degree we're applying to. So we're going to be making connections between list 1 and list 2. And so after we've made all these connections, we're finally ready to start writing the personal statement. And the first thing you're going to do is just make an outline of any of these connections you think are remotely interesting or, worth talking about. It's just going to be a very rough list of these connections. And then after you made this list, we're going to start filling it in, right? We're going to start adding meat to the bone, so to speak. And at this stage, you don't want to worry about, the tone or if what you're writing makes sense. Just get everything on paper as much as you can. In my personal statement, right, this is how I connected my previous education in public administration to the degree I was applying to, which was an MPhil in development studies. So one of the things I had written down was that my degree, my master's and bachelor's in public administration and public governance was very multidisciplinary. And so the degree I was applying to at Oxford, also the MPhil in development studies, is also multidisciplinary. And so I made that connection. And this is also how I started my personal statement. I'm going to show you just exactly how I did it in a minute. So what I said is this. What fascinates me about the MPhil in development studies is its multi and interdisciplinary approach. In my first year, my policy analysis professor introduced the concept of wicked problems, and ever since, I have not forgotten it. Societal problems are complex and often require multifaceted solutions. As Robert Dilts explains, an important characteristic of genius is the ability to entertain different perspectives of a subject or process. This concept of pluralism of perspectives is perfectly captured by this degree. By combining aspects of politics, history, economics, and anthropology, this program will strengthen my ability to approach societal problems from different angles and enable me to contribute to long-term sustainable change. My internships, volunteer experiences, perfecting Dutch in under 6 months, and completing my undergraduate studies with distinction are the reasons I am convinced that I have what it takes to study in this program. And so I made this connection, right, between what I wanted to do at Oxford and what I had already done. And I placed this connection very early on in the personal statement on purpose because you don't have a lot of space to write a lot of things or to write anything that you want. So you have to be very strategic. My God. You have to be very strategic. Oh my God, English. With, what you're writing and how you're writing it. And you want to put always the strongest things first, the strongest things early on. And this shows that you are it shows immediately to the reader that you are the perfect fit for the program. And it kind of sets the tone for the rest of your personal statement. So it's really important to do that first, right? Before we go on to the principles that you need to keep in mind while you write your personal statement, if you've been enjoying this tips so far, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second or something. Moving on. As you write, there are a number of key principles that you need to keep in mind. And you need to use these principles to sort of like evaluate everything that you've written down, right? And the first of these principles is, so what? Every time that you introduce an experience, you need to ask yourself and be able to answer, why does this experience matter for this specific context? If you can't answer that question, then this is how you know that that experience is not right to include in your personal statement. You can put it in your CV, right? But not in the personal statement, because you can't answer the question, so what? So for example, in my own personal statement, I wrote the following: volunteering as a mentor and buddy for young people with a migration background has enhanced my leadership skills and challenged my perception of the world, opening my eye to what Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie describes as the dangers of a single story. Refugees or young people are often wrongly portrayed as what Toni Morrison calls the other, and such simplistic compartmentalizations are inherently problematic. These experiences have developed my understanding of the intricacy of the human experience and the diversity of voices and experiences that make up the world. These insights, I think, are of utmost importance for the social anthropology course. Again, I connected my previous experiences as a volunteer, my own, extracurricular reading, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Toni Morrison, to the course I was applying to. And in fact, this specific sentence here, these experiences have developed my understanding of the intricacy of the human experience and the diversity of voices and experiences that make up the world. I took that from the course website, exactly as was stated there. I took that from the course website and I introduced that here so that they understand that, one, I know why I'm applying to this course, I know what it entails, and I'm very aware of everything that, I need to have, all the previous knowledge that I need to have to be able to study that course. And that's super important. Now, I could have said, oh, I like Toni Morrison, or I volunteered for asylum seekers in Belgium. But the reader could have been, or would have been like, okay, so why are you telling me this, right? It wouldn't have had any impact on them. Another thing is, the volunteer experience that I mentioned with asylum seekers in Belgium, it's not the only volunteer experience that I have. I have multiple volunteer experiences, but this was the only relevant one for the course that I was applying to, right? And I only included it because I could answer that question, so what? Another example is moving to Belgium and learning Dutch in 6 months. I briefly introduced that in my introduction, but I never talked about it again in the rest of my personal statement. This was on purpose, right? Because again, I couldn't I couldn't answer the question, so what? Why is this important here, right? If I was applying to, say, a course in language or something, communications, I probably would have included that experience, that having learned Dutch, a entirely new language at 16, in 6 months. I would have probably included that. But because I couldn't answer the so what for this course, which is on development studies, then it wasn't relevant, so I didn't include it. There's a principle in creative writing called don't introduce a gun if you're not going to use it. So think about it like this. You're watching a movie and suddenly someone pulls out a gun. And then the scene cuts and the movie just goes on further and nothing else is said about that gun. Nothing else is done with that gun. You're going to be like, why introduce the gun if you're not going to use it? Why did you show us the gun if, nothing is going to happen with that gun? Your personal statement is no different. You don't want to introduce anything that doesn't serve a purpose, that doesn't have a reason why it's in the personal statement, because you don't have a lot of space or words to talk about everything that you want to talk about. So you have to make sure that everything that you're including has a purpose and serves a purpose, right? And the next principle that I want to talk about is show, don't tell. So instead of saying, oh, I love to read, I'm an avid reader, what I did in my own personal statement is that I casually introduced different authors who I love. Morrison, Adichie, Robert Dilts, Vanessa Nakate. In the personal statement that I wrote for LSE, I also talked about Dennis Mukwege, right? So instead of saying, oh yeah, I love to read, I read a lot of books, I just show them that I read without necessarily saying that, I am an average reader, right? And so finally, we are ready to conclude the personal statement. The conclusion is super important because in the conclusion, you want to tell the reader what you're going to do with your education, what you're going to do with the education that you get at the university. How are you going to contribute to the world, right? And so this is how I concluded my own personal statement that I wrote for Oxford. Young girls and women in Nigeria continue to be denied access to education or other basic human rights. Climate change exacerbates existing inequalities, and young women are more likely to be disproportionately affected by the environmental crisis. After my education at Oxford, I aim to seek employment with the United Nations Women's Organization Africa or other similar organizations that are dedicated to gender equality and the empowerment of women. And how I concluded this personal statement, again, is on purpose, right? I'm applying to the MPhil in Development Studies. And so I concluded, because I also talked about in various different ways in my personal statement about the connection between gender equality and the climate crisis, I concluded my statement like that as well, right? So something important that I also forgot to mention is that there needs to be a common thread throughout your personal statement. That's something super important. I'm so sorry I forgot to mention this, but there needs to be a common thread in what you're writing. There needs to be a story that you're telling, right? If you've listened to the various parts of my personal statements that I've read out to you, what you would see is that I'm talking about gender equality and the climate crisis. Those are the overarching themes in my personal statements. And so I'm telling a story, right? And there's one red line in between or between everything that I've written down. And so this is how you also need to approach your personal statements. Beyond that connection that you're making between what you know, your education, your experiences, and what you want to do at the university you're applying to, beyond being able to answer the questions, so what? Beyond being able to, answer the question of show, don't tell, beyond being able to apply the principle of show, don't tell. Another really important thing is you need to have a common thread in your personal statement. That's super important. You don't want to start by talking about gender equality and the climate crisis, and then somewhere in the middle you talk about something else entirely, I don't know, migration and racism or something, and then at the end you talk about, I don't know, capitalism or something. So you need to make sure that there's someone who's reading your personal statement know that there's a theme in that statement. It also makes it easier for the person to understand what you are about and who you're about and what you like, so that's really important. I should have mentioned this first actually, but this is super important to keep in mind as well. If you've made it this far, what you would realize from my personal statement is that there is no mind-blowing once in a lifetime experience that I've mentioned, right? Everything that I've included in my personal statement are things that could be described as quote unquote mundane. So what I focused on is my knowledge from my previous education, from the internship that I did at the UNU Chris, from my volunteer experiences, the books that I've read, right? These things, when I was making my list, right, they seemed very mundane and ordinary at first. But honestly, I guess the key is to embrace the mundane, right? Because this is what a personal statement is about. It's about your own personal experiences. And as I said at the start of this video, these universities don't expect you to have all these fancy pantsy experience. They don't expect that from you, right? So embrace the mundane and be confident really about writing your personal statement. Because if there's anything I've learned about life is that if you present yourself like you deserve something, people will most likely believe you. So write that personal statement with confidence. Act like you pretend, if you have to, that you deserve to be at that university that you're applying to. Because if you present yourself as such, they will believe that you deserve to be there and they will most likely give you a place there, right? This is the energy that you need to put into your personal statement. So that's all for this video. If you want to know about the mistakes that I made when I applied to Oxford and LSE, you might want to see the video linked here. And if you like this video, you think it would, the tips that I've discussed so far were helpful, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. It takes you a second. If there's anything else you want me to discuss, any questions that you have, please let me know in the comments. I'm always there replying to every single comment. Thank you so much for watching the video this far, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.